Welcome to Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to New Mexicans by State Employees Credit Union, who have been proudly serving the families of New Mexico locally and abroad since 1958. State Employees Credit Union is ready to help you and your family with all your financial goals. And now, Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater.
Hi, welcome to the program. I'm Diane Kinderwater. If you have a complaint about the police department in Albuquerque, who do you turn to? Well, there is an organization, an agency where you can turn. But before I talk about if you have a complaint, what if you have a compliment? What if there's something going on correctly that you'd like to say there should be a commendation for this particular police officer? Well, I believe it's the same agency who you can turn to. So on the show today, we're going to talk about the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, which was established here in, I think, 2014. But we're going to talk about the history of what did we have before this oversight agency. And we're going to talk about what kind of complaints, what kind of commendations is this agency handling and investigating. So please stay with us as we learn all about the Civilian Police Oversight Agency here in Albuquerque. We'll be back right after this. The Civilian Police Oversight Agency, have you heard of that before? Perhaps if you had a problem with police officers, or if you thought someone was doing really well, you had a chance to maybe go online and make a commendation or possibly a complaint. Well, on the show today, we're going to talk about that process. If there is a process, a problem that you've had with Albuquerque police officers, where do you turn? Who do you turn to? And one of those is my guest today, the Executive Director of the Civilian Police Officer Agency, Edward Harness. Thank you so much, Edward, for being part of the program today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
And I know part of your program is kind of outreach to the public, and that's what we're doing here. I hadn't really paid too much attention to this, but of course, we hear in the news now today people complaining about police officers across the country and here in Albuquerque.
Yes.
On the same side, there are people who are complimenting and are appreciative of the service our police officers are giving. And I know your agency handles both, but I imagine there's a few more complaints than commendations.
Well, when I first got here almost 5 years ago, it was about 50-50, compliments and complaints.
Wow.
But I think we've shifted more to a ratio of about 70-30, 70% complaints, 30% commendations. But those commendations come into us and they go directly into the officer's personnel file.
I give people credit for actually making commendations and being appreciative. So if somebody were appreciative of the service they received from a police officer, do they turn to your agency, or wouldn't they first probably go to the police department and say, I'd like to make a commendation for this police officer?
You could do both. You can go directly from our website, CPOA.gov/CPOA, and right at the top there's a little link there to file a commendation for an officer. Or you can go directly to the department through 242 Cops or through their website as well.
We've been seeing more complaints now. We're going to talk about those complaints first because that's kind of the juicy part. What kind of complaints are there? But then also the process. I mean, really, what happens when a person complains? Does anything really happen with it? But that's my question. Does anything happen? Does it just stop there? But let's talk about, you came 5 years ago. What types of complaints were we seeing with our police officers handling members of the public 5 years ago compared to today?
Well, I think they're roughly the same. Lately, though, because of some of the turmoil within the community, we've had an uptick in use of force complaints because of the protests that have been happening within the city. But generally, we take any type of complaint against anyone from APD, including non-sworn personnel. So if you have a problem with a telecommunicator, or if you have a problem with some administrative staff at one of the command stations, those complaints would come to us as well.
What kind of complaints are we talking about?
There's the general rudeness, accuracy of reports, use of force, which is a large topic because of the court-approved settlement agreement. But the spectrum is wide. So any type of complaint, we're mandated to take it and to do an investigation.
Okay, you said from rudeness to incorrect reports. I can understand, yeah, if you're upset about somebody, how they handled you on the phone or in person, that they take the effort. I always look at it as an effort to have the manager kind of correct a problem. I mean, that's perhaps how this agency is looking at it as well. If there's a problem out there that needs correcting, I shouldn't say small, but rudeness is one. Of course, accuracy of a report is another.
Yes.
But anything in between before we go to overuse of force? I mean,
Well,
what other things?
we have had allegations of extortion. There's
bribery,
There's
sex. I'm
obviously
thinking now that we're getting rolling here. I'm thinking the headlines I've seen.
we do get complaints about relationships within the department, sometimes from spouses and non-spouses. We've had a couple of high-profile investigations regarding overtime abuse. So it's a wide spectrum.
That is wide. Now we're getting into it, Edward. So a complaint comes into the well, how about use of force? Oh, what is it? Overuse of force? That's
Yes,
they're all
excessive.
serious.
Yes,
Excessive use of force.
excessive use of force, yes.
Tell me some examples of some complaints that have come into the department, or into your agency, I should say.
There's, let's see, what's one of our most recent? Allegations of being shoved into a fence after already being handcuffed. That would be an excessive use of force. That would be deemed a level 3 use of force. And if that event happened and it was reported, then the department would already be investigating that. If it didn't get reported, then we would investigate it and determine whether or not there's some validity to the allegations.
What's the difference between your agency, again, the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, and internal investigation? I guess if we're talking about the excessive use of force, Edward, a person is handcuffed in front, I suppose in front or behind?
No, in back.
In back?
Yeah, they should be in
And
back.
if they were allegedly pushed into a fence, or shoved into a fence by a police officer, it couldn't be investigated internally unless somebody complained. I mean, the suspect perhaps complained.
Yes, the suspect could have complained on scene, or the officer has a duty to report that to their supervisor. To make a distinction between our agency and internal affairs would handle anything, and it sounds obvious, but anything internal. So if it's APD personnel having a problem with other APD personnel, then internal affairs would do that. Also, if it's criminal in any way, then APD would do that. But if the source of the complaint comes from a civilian, then that gets investigated by our agency.
I guess I thought it was internal affairs. So a complaint from a civilian about the police isn't investigated by internal affairs.
No.
It's by the Civilian Police Oversight
Correct.
Agency.
Right. And they have a duty, if you go and say to APD personnel, I want to file a complaint against you, they have a duty to turn it over to us within 3 business days.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk about the process. Let's set up a scenario.
Okay.
One of the juicier ones. I shouldn't say that was bad. I shouldn't have even used the word juicier, but one to attract attention rather than complaining about rudeness, because
Sure.
we've all run into that.
Sure.
So give me another example of what you've dealt with recently.
Well, let's see. Well, we just we had a complaint about a use of excessive force at the protests the night of the shooting in Albuquerque, where one of the civilians was shot by another civilian. During that event, when they were clearing the scene, there were allegations of a use of force. So that information came to us, and we initiated an investigation.
And this was, I think, what month was it?
June.
June and June.
June,
They were
yes,
protesting
mid-June.
Black Lives Matter. What were they protesting?
This was around the Oñate.
The statue.
The statue.
Okay, I
yes.
think one group was taking it down, another group said
Right,
don't take it
right.
down, and there was a scuffle, and I guess a civilian shot another person. The other person says self-defense.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So
But
that protest.
in that same event, there were allegations that an officer shoved someone with a baton, caused injuries, and that they felt that that was excessive. So because we received it, because it was involving a civilian, then we conducted an investigation.
Do you think in that case, Edward, the civilian knew, did they complain to the police department? The police department said within 3 days, or they gave it to you within 3 days, or did the civilian know to contact you?
They knew to contact us.
Okay.
And they contacted us directly.
Oh.
Spoke with one of our administrative staff, took the details of the complaint, gave us information for a possible witness. And so we started an investigation. Our investigations take up to 120 days. That's what's allowed by the collective bargaining agreement. Once the investigation is completed, then if there are findings of violations of policy, we don't investigate criminal, we only investigate administrative investigations. So if there's a violation of Albuquerque Police Department policy, then we will recommend discipline to the chief.
Okay. Can you speak about this case? It probably hasn't been investigated.
This one hasn't been fully completed yet.
Okay. But if a case similar to this were completed, you'd have 180 days.
120 days.
120 days.
Right.
You do the investigation, you
Right.
talk to witnesses,
Right.
you gather photos, whatever is needed, video, cell phone videos.
Cell phone videos, we have full access to the officer's on-body recording device as well. Witness statements, complainant statements, all of that comes together along with all the police reports, and
wow.
the investigators will issue a finding, submit it to me. I will then review it. I will then look, if in fact we find there's a problem, I will then review the history of the officer as far as whether there's been other charges and other discipline. And then based upon that, I will make a recommendation that will go to the Police Oversight Board, the Civilian Police Oversight Agency Board, that reviews that and then sends it on to the chief for the chief's final decision.
Once the chief receives this, it's up to the police chief to decide if they're going to accept the recommendations for discipline or not?
That's correct. And if the chief does not agree with our recommendation, within 30 days of the completion of the discipline process, the chief must submit in writing to the board why he or she did not concur with our findings.
Can you tell me, Edward, over the past 5 years that you've been with this agency, what percentage of recommendations have been accepted and what percentage have not?
Under the Eden administration, it was about 50-50. Under Chief Geyer, it's been about 90%, where the chief accepts the recommendations of the CPOA.
And again, if a chief were not, again, Chief Geyer just recently retired, you have another acting police chief.
Correct.
To send all this information to. There's a 30-day period for the complainant to appeal?
No, well, actually there is a 30-day appeal process for the complainant after everything is done. So let's say in the case of discipline for an officer, the complainant can appeal the actual investigation findings, and that would come to the CPOA. Or if the complainant is not happy with the discipline,
recommended discipline,
that discipline appeal would go to the chief administrative officer of the city. So there's two different appeal
well,
tracks.
they can appeal can they appeal the recommendation your board makes to the police chief?
Not the recommendation, only the investigation findings. There's three criteria outlined in the ordinance for what constitutes grounds for an appeal.
And one is that they don't agree with the
They
investigation.
believe that evidence wasn't considered. They think that the finding was arbitrary or capricious, those fancy, or they think that the wrong policy was examined. Those are the three.
But not your recommendation of discipline?
No, not the recommendation for discipline.
What kind of discipline things are we talking about, Edward?
Oh, anything from a verbal reprimand all the way to dismissal from the department.
What would a verbal reprimand do?
It's a part of progressive discipline. So if you have a verbal reprimand and then an officer has the same infraction again within a year, then it would move to a written reprimand or possibly a suspension. So it's progressive discipline.
And I had gotten to the point where if the police chief doesn't accept the recommendation, you said under the previous administration, 50-50, under Geyer was 90% accepting the Civilian Police Oversight Agency's recommendation for discipline. The 10% when they don't accept it, does the civilian have any appeal?
They can appeal that to the chief administrative officer of the city. So that goes directly to the CAO.
Okay. How independent is the agency of the police department and the city council and the mayor?
Well, we are independent but accountable too. So there's no ability for any city government entity to step in and change the results from the CPOA. But we are accountable to the city because everyone that works at the CPOA, the administrative office, is a city employee. So we are part of the budget process. We're going through the budget numbers now for fiscal year 21. We're going to be finishing those in the next couple of weeks. But it is set up so that the board answers to the city council and does not answer directly to the mayor or the chief or anyone else.
And I believe the board, 9-member board is selected by the city council.
That's correct. Yeah.
How long are the terms of the board members, and how can the people?
They're 3-year terms.
3 years.
And they are on a rotating basis so that we're not having everybody on or off at the same time. You can serve 2 3-year terms. Right now we have 2 openings, so if anybody's interested in applying for the board, we do have 2 openings. Council Services are considering some applications as we speak. But we continually have openings on the board because it's a very time-intensive operation for the board members, because they not only review the work of the agency for complaints, but there's also the review of serious use of force cases and officer-involved shooting cases that the board reviews after it's completed the process with APD.
Oh, so excessive use of force and police shootings are also reviewed by your agency?
That's correct.
So you've had quite a lot of work in the recent years.
Yes, I think we average probably about 8 officer-involved shootings a year. That's been the number since I got here.
How is the U.S. Department of Justice involved with this? I know we're under dictate, our police department is, I'm not sure if it's not correct to dictate, but recommendations or requirements that the Department of Justice has imposed on our police department. I'm not sure how many years that's going to continue or if we're satisfying things, but is this, your agency, a part of that?
We are. We are actually evaluated by the monitor who was appointed by the court in conjunction with the Department of Justice's lawsuit. It's the court-approved settlement agreement. You'll hear everybody call it the CASA, court-approved settlement agreement. We are being evaluated by the monitor as well as the Albuquerque Police Department. We are, I think, about 60% full compliance with the CASA. There was still a couple of years to go to finalize the use of force portions of the settlement agreement. Originally, the city thought they could get it done in 4 years. We're in almost year 6 now. I would anticipate at least 2.5 to 3 more years before we would finish the paragraphs of the settlement agreement.
And that lawsuit was brought about because of excessive force and because of police-involved shootings?
Yes, a pattern. The Department of Justice found that there was a pattern and practice of excessive force by the department.
Your agency, how many people work at, how many investigators do you have, Edward?
We have 4.
Just 4?
We have
just 4?
Just 4, yes. We have just 4 investigators. We're trying to increase that number by 50%. We're trying to get to 6, hopefully within this new budget. We also have a community engagement specialist. We also have a data analyst who looks at the numbers for complaints and force and those types of things.
And what can you tell me about those numbers off the top? If
Off
you
the
have
top
the
of
off
my
the top
head,
of your generally speaking. Yeah, generally speaking. I mean, you have a numbers person.
Well, there has been an increase in the use of force numbers, and that is in part because the department is doing a better job of actually tracking its use of force. And that was one of the problems with why the settlement agreement came into place. And then the first use of force policy that was adopted under the CASA was not a very good policy, and it meant there was underreporting. So you will see the department is going to be producing a 4-year tracking of use of force within the next few months, and you will see an increase in the numbers. But I don't know that it means that the department is more violent. I think it's really a part of the fact that they're actually tracking it better.
For excessive use of force.
For force, period.
Just
Yes.
force.
Just force, yes.
Well, some force is allowed.
Yes, some force is a natural, it's a natural part of law enforcement. It's the excessive force, the unconstitutional use of force, that's a problem.
And this report will come out when?
I think they're going to have it out in a few months. We just had a
Okay.
compliance update about 2 weeks ago. They're waiting for some arrest data to complete the use of force report, and then they will be publishing it.
Any other findings that you can share that you're thinking we'll find in this report?
As far as the force report goes, I think you'll see some stark differences for the evaluation from the start of the CASA to where they are now, because there was a change in the evaluation of force. It went from a 2-tiered evaluation system to a 3-tiered evaluation system, much more concrete and better outlined. So you'll see some distinctions probably starting in early 2019.
Any other characterizations that you, as the executive director of the Civilian Police Oversight, can share? Not just your opinion, but what your agency is able to tell us about our police department in Albuquerque.
I think that they're being diligent about ensuring that they're operating constitutionally. There is still some backlash for the CASA. You'll hear the monitor talk about a counter-CASA culture. And culture change is what is needed for the department. And they're working toward it. There's a compliance bureau that's doing a very good job of ensuring that good policies get put into place so good training happens so that the officers are better equipped. They're doing a much better job of dealing with people in a mental health crisis, which many of the shootings were people in a mental health crisis prior to the settlement agreement. And so that the department should be congratulated for its work with the Crisis Intervention Unit and the work that they're doing there, for sure.
We have just a couple minutes left. As we told you, Edward Harness, the executive director of the Civilian Police Oversight Agency. This show goes fast, but again, you have an opportunity to share with our audience anything else about your agency and what you would like the civilians to do. What should they do if they want to report it? If they witness something, should they document things a certain way? I mean, I think everybody now with a cell phone knows how to document, but what would you suggest they do if there's actually a serious infraction that they're witnessing against their constitutional rights? What do they need to do to get to you?
Absolutely. There's so many ways to reach us. You can go directly to the website, cabq.gov/CPOA, and you can fill out the form there. You can do it anonymously, and you can do it on behalf of someone else. So you can file a complaint on behalf if you're a third party. So we also have complaint forms around about 55 different community centers throughout the city. So there's a paper complaint form there. You can mail it. You can call our office, 924-3770, directly to file a complaint. You can email, fax, or if you run into anybody from APD, they're obligated to take the complaint. So you can file your complaint with APD personnel as well, and it'll come directly to us.
And when do you get back to the civilian about receiving the complaint?
We will reach out to them when we open the investigation, and then upon completion of the investigation, we will send them the findings.
Wow. And that process can be, again, the 120, up to 120 days.
Right. By the time the complainant gets the final information, you're probably looking at about 180 days by the time it goes through a review at the department and then comes back to us. So
They
about
don't need
180
attorneys,
days.
the complainant
No.
doesn't need an attorney.
No.
What other kind of evidence is successful for them to provide?
Well, you know,
Basically.
obviously cell phone video is compelling. Witness statements, information and access to other people that are at the event. The statements that we will get from the complainant, our investigators will get a statement from them as well. And then, like I said before, we have access to all of the lapel video from the department, so we can pull those up without seeking any permission. We have direct access, and we can look at an event as soon as we learn about it. We can look at the lapel video and start.
And
the
how
investigation.
confident should we feel as citizens of Albuquerque or visitors to Albuquerque that we have this civilian police oversight agency?
I think you should feel very confident. It's been an evolving system since 1978. Usually it changed by some sort of catastrophic event within the community, but it's getting better and better, and we have great professional staff to do great investigations.
Edward Harness, thank you for being part of our program and for being part of our community.
Thanks for
Know what
having me.
you're
I
doing.
appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater is presented as a public service to New Mexicans by State Employees Credit Union, which has proudly been serving the families in New Mexico locally and abroad since 1958. State Employees Credit Union is ready to help you and your family with all your financial goals and is the exclusive sponsor of Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater in order to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program or to purchase a DVD copy of any Issues and Answers program, visit sunbroadcasting.org or call us at 505-345-1991.